Resto Pros Midlands, SC.com. There when you need them. Many folks need them right now, obviously, as we continue to work through all these hurricanes here in the Southeast, and Resto Pros is there to help you get cleaned up when you need to get cleaned up. They are Gamecock owned and operated, Resto Pros Midlands, SC.com, and the Barndo Company builds dream homes in the Carolinas. And then to the west of us, the fake Peach State, which is Georgia for all you Clemson fans. And then up there in the Volunteer State, that would be Tennessee, the barndoco.com. JC, Mad Dog, and myself, JB, until 2 o'clock today. Mike Morgan will join us. Perry Orth will join us. But we're joined at the top of the program from our buddies to the west of the West, on the other side of the fake Peach State. Roger, I call it the fake Peach State because South Carolina produces 12% of the nation's peaches. Georgia only produces 5% of the nation's peaches. So I really just don't like the whole Peach State thing. As you can tell, we've got a grudge around here. But Roger Hoover with the Crimson Tide Sports Network, Carolina will head to T-Town this weekend to take on Alabama, both coming off of a loss. One, maybe not so unexpected. The other, very unexpected, and that would be Alabama up in Nashville, and we're going to get the latest there. But first and foremost, my man, I think we had you on during basketball season, and it's so great to see you again. You do such an amazing job, and thanks for accepting our invitation. How are you? How's your family?
Hey, everyone's doing well, and I mean, this is the first time I've seen the beginning of your show, and I got to say, I love the theme song. I love everything you guys did just to welcome us into the show. That Carolina montage was awesome as well. So thrilled to be with you guys, as, again, I always say, in my future home state of South Carolina once I finally retire.
You are always welcome here, my man. But Alabama is a neat state. It's a beautiful, so a lot of people don't realize how beautiful it is. Much like South Carolina, you get surprised when you get to the upstate. And you see mountains and things like that, and of course the beautiful beaches down there. But y'all are almost right in the center, T-Town. And last week, Alabama was the center of the college football discussion, but not in the way that they're used to being, right, Roger? They went up to Nashville and came home with an L. So what's I think the obvious question is, what's the mood like been around there for the last couple of days?
It's been tough. I mean, you go from the highest of highs after beating Georgia, and all of a sudden now you're the number one ranked team in the country, to really the lowest of lows, losing to a Vanderbilt team, a school you hadn't lost to since 1984. I had won 23 straight against the Commodores, and just kind of no one really saw it coming again based on how well the Georgia game went. And it was pretty humbling, I think, from the start. Vanderbilt scores the opening touchdown. They get the pick six off a tip ball, and all of a sudden you're down 13-0, and it really took Alabama out of its game plan in terms of having a lot of balance on offense. So you're throwing the football more. Jalen Miller is trying to do everything he can to kind of will Alabama back in the game, which he did. He had a really good performance. But with that, the Crimson Tide did not run the football very much. And with that meant some shorter drives, and the defense had to get right back on the field against a Vanderbilt offense that was just relentless, converting a lot of third downs after Alabama had been pretty good throughout the season on third down to enter the year. Just Vanderbilt had the knack for the big play when they needed it. Even on a 4th and short around midfield, they go over the top for a 36-yard touchdown. And that was kind of the backbreaker, it seemed like, in that ball game. So, it's a tough one for the offense. You felt like you did a lot of good things, still put up 35 points, still get Ryan Williams involved, the sensational freshman. But just defensively, it was a tough performance against the option and against their quarterback, Diego Pavia, and just not making sound fundamental tackles. There were just a lot of breakdowns for Alabama in that game. And I think it's something they're really working on, getting ready for what's coming up Saturday, knowing how talented Lenora Sellers and even Robbie Ashford, if we see him, and then especially Raheem Sanders. I mean, South Carolina's got Alabama's full attention because we know the Gamecocks roster looks a lot better on paper than what we just saw beat us with Vanderbilt.
Look, I think that I probably speak for most people across the country. Kalen DeBoer he might be the best coach in college football. He really is just outstanding. And obviously what happened last week, when you look on, Vanderbilt is not a better football team than Alabama, but Vanderbilt beat them last Saturday. And hey, look, all streaks come to an end. JC mentioned it earlier this year. Vanderbilt's going to beat somebody. You just hope it's not you. If there's any team that can bounce back, it is obviously Alabama. The thing that made Coach Saban, as you well know, Nick very, very well, that made him so excellent as a football coach was the attention to detail. Worry about today, we'll worry about tomorrow, just keeping you in the moment and doing the little thing. The little things always add up to the big things, and that's why Alabama's at the top of the college football planet. They are still and always, at least for the foreseeable future, will be what everybody aspires to be. But the last couple of games, they beat Georgia, but the Dogs were perfect on fourth down, 5 for 5. And then, of course, they lose in Nashville. And you mentioned the third down numbers, which you never see that against that Alabama defense, 12 of 18. And a lot of it, of course, had to do with Diego Pavia and how wonderfully he played. But those are money downs when you're on third down. Alabama's used to getting off the field. So what have you learned anything about that this week and what they've been doing to try to correct those mistakes and those issues?
For the most part, it's just kind of back to work. Kalen DeBoer is very consistent. It trusts this defense, led by defense coordinator Kane Womack. And for Alabama, it just comes down to making tackles. I mean, there were so many of those plays where Alabama had, some contact on the ball carrier, but then the ball carrier broke a tackle and got those extra 2 or 3 yards that were the difference in a third down conversion. That's just something we hadn't seen all throughout the season, even in some tough moments during the Georgia game. So I think just for this group to kind of get refocused on the defensive side of the ball. And again, they were just gassed by the time we got to the fourth quarter with how fast Alabama's offensive game plan had to go when you're in scramble mode down by 1 or 2 scores. And then, Vanderbilt exhausted the play clock and had very long drives from the very start. And that's why the time of possession was so lopsided in Vanderbilt's favor, 42 and change to 17 and change for Alabama. So, I think it comes down to, Alabama's playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, just having to look at themselves in the mirror and look at a really tough tape to watch and say, okay, how do we get better from here? And it goes really back to fundamentals. So when you really think about it, just making sure you're getting your ball carrier down to the ground and stopping them before they have a chance to make a special play.
The series all time, by the way, is 11-4 in favor of the Tide. Really 12-3. The 05 game was vacated. The last couple of trips that the Gamecocks have made to T-Town have been low scoring. The team with 20 wins. I was there in 09 when Mark Ingram took virtually every snap in the second half, Roger, and willed the Tide to a 20-6 victory over the Gamecocks. I was also there in 2004 when Carolina came out on top of that one. A very sleepy day in T-Town, 20-3, the final, as Coach Holtz back then just kept running the ball, and then Carolina found a way to get it done. There will be a lot of running the football tomorrow. This is the opposing view, so we're asking you about Alabama here. Raising my hand, I said this in the JC, Phil, they can both vouch for me. Said it all summer, spring, and early fall. My favorite quarterback is Jalen Milroe. Love watching him play. I've loved watching his development. I think we all have, Roger. And now here is another stud wide receiver. This kid is unbelievable, Ryan Williams. So their connection is just lethal. How about the growth of Jalen Milroe in the offseason, and then obviously pairing that with this electric freshman?
I think Jalen's confidence has improved so much. We saw that last year when he went through the trials and tribulations of the year, where he probably wasn't the perfect fit for what offensive coordinator Tommy Rees wanted. It seemed like early in the year, and that led to some butting of heads. Obviously, the Texas game didn't go well, and then Jalen doesn't play at all against South Florida. But then starting with the Ole Miss game, and maybe Coach Saban intervened a bit, made sure that there were game plans tailored for Jalen Milroe, a lot of designed quarterback runs and things like that. As you mentioned, he's such a good athlete. He's essentially the third running back when you consider him, Justice Haynes, and Jam Miller in this three-headed attack for Alabama offensively. But he got better as the season went along, and now Kalen DeBoer, has embraced him from the start. When Coach DeBoer got the job and Nick Sheridan takes over as offensive coordinator, and they're able to use a lot of the things they used before with Michael Penix Jr. at Washington to really Jalen's benefit, and he's thrived in the system so far. He's getting a lot better. Everyone knows he can throw the deep ball, but he's gotten a lot better at the short and intermediate passing game. And then when he wants to go deep, all he has to do is look for number 2, Ryan Williams, as you mentioned, a freshman phenom who could not have been any more hyped than he was, being a 5-star, reclassifying a year early, as you guys have heard a million times, and I won't say it beyond this one time. He's 17. He should be a senior in high school. But he's a fantastic playmaker. And, he wowed everybody with 2 touchdowns against Western Kentucky in the opener. But then the next week against South Florida and then Wisconsin, he was used in the short passing game. And he became a go-to guy when Alabama really needed to move the ball against South Florida with only a 1-point lead in the fourth quarter. So, he is the guy in terms of being a trusted target. But there's a lot of skill players around him, like Jeremy Bernard, a good wide receiver that played in this system last year at Washington. He's a great option. Kobe Prentice is a little banged up. I believe he's either probable or questionable for the ball game after taking a hard hit against Vanderbilt, but he's electric, as well as Kendrick Law, a good playmaker with some speed, who was out this past week against Vanderbilt. So Alabama's got some really good options there. And the last ball game, they started using the tight end a lot more in the passing game. CJ Dupree and Josh Cuevas are two really good options there, along with a South Carolina native in Robbie Oates, who you'll keep an eye out for coming up this Saturday. So Jalen's pretty comfortable with this offense. And again, 40 points against Georgia, 35 even in the losing effort against Vanderbilt, where you didn't have that many drives. Alabama only punted the ball twice and then had two drives end in takeaways, the interception, as well as a sack fumble. That was really a tough turning point in this ball game late against Vandy.
35 points in 17 minutes in too shabby. It gets, obviously the focus this week has been the fact that they lost. Alabama's offense is electric. So, and look, this Carolina defense is pretty good, and they were put in some bad spots last week. The fake punt did not work. And then the fumble by Robbie Ashford, and then there's Ole Miss. They can strike in a hurry, and they did. And then had a couple of tough calls go against them in the LSU game. You had all that stuff up, and you still look at it's like the 20th ranked defense in the country. They like where they are there. And obviously the struggles for South Carolina to be consistent on the offensive side of the football are hampering things. They got to get that going. But so it's on the back of the defense to kind of will this thing or try to keep this thing close and give them a chance. So how do you attack Alabama, Roger? I mean, you've watched every snap of those guys. Like we mentioned, they can flat out score, very consistent at moving the football, very balanced. So how do you attack them?
I think you got to start with getting pressure on Jalen Milroe, because he's done a much better job this year of not making mistakes with the ball in his hands. Now we've seen it pop up here and there, interceptions the last two ball games, but for the most part, he's really taking care of the football well. But just anything to disrupt his timing, and a lot of times last year, his timing was disrupted from some bad snaps from his center, most notably on the final play of the Rose Bowl. This year, everything's been much more consistent there. I think this offensive line's played a lot better for Alabama, but they are still a little vulnerable on the right side of that offensive line. So if Carolina gets pressured there, disrupts the timing of Milroe, I mean, that's the main way to win, because if you try to key in on, shutting down the passing game, this Alabama running attack can really disrupt you, not only with the option game with Milroe running, but just alone. Justice Haynes, Jam Miller, they're kind of built to that same mold of the great Alabama running backs you've seen before. Like you talked about Mark Ingram in 2009, Trent Richardson. I mean, they have that kind of attack. We just haven't really seen it utilized as much this year with how dynamic the passing game has been and some early leads Alabama's built up. So I think this is a really solid football team on offense. And again, I think the best way to disrupt them is find a way to get in the backfield and make a play.
On the other side of the football, though, look, I mentioned Carolina's struggling, at least in the Ole Miss game. You felt like things were going in the right direction offensively. Of course, the Rocket Sanders gets a little banged up. Lenore Sellers gets a little banged up. And then they last week just really couldn't get anything going at all. Multiple drives across the 50 against the Rebels, no points. And that's just not going to work in T-Town this weekend. But Alabama defensively, we already talked about the fourth down issues against Georgia, the third down issues against Vanderbilt. One of the things we've discussed on this program a lot this week with our good buddy Mike Morgan, Mike well, Alabama recruits elite athletes at the corner position, at the safety position. They've never been scared since Nick Saban got there to put their dudes out one-on-one on islands and let's attack. Let's play aggressive football on the defensive side. So what do you do offensively? How seeing some of the issues they've had the last couple of games, understanding their personnel like you do, Roger, if you're an offense like South Carolina, what are you trying to do to move the football down the field against the Tide D?
Well, I don't think you're going to beat them downfield too much in terms of a long passing game, but you can beat them with a shorter or more intermediate passing game. Diego Pavia did a really good job of that this past week, especially on third down, where I believe he completed 8 passes on third downs to move the chains. I mean, he was electric in that aspect of the ball game. And the other area where Alabama's been pretty vulnerable this year is just teams that run the football. And even we saw this against South Florida with Byron Brown, their quarterback kind of ran all over Alabama. And kind of like you were saying about Carolina Carolina against Ole Miss. They just didn't convert in the red zone to scoring any points, but they were able to move the ball past the 50 and get downfield. And then we saw it, to the top degree this past week with Diego Pavia, with the way he was able to run with the football and that option attack of Vanderbilt. I think this team's pretty vulnerable right now in its run defense. They've been able to supply some pressure on the quarterback. Q Robinson's done a nice job getting to the backfield, getting some sacks, but outside of that, right around the defensive line, while there are some playmakers, this is a group that's not been consistent so far to begin the season, and they've been giving up large swaths of running room to pretty much every opponent, even Wisconsin, in a dominant win so far this year. So I think that's probably where Alabama's most vulnerable going into a matchup like this. And again, that Lenore Sellers, everyone's got their full attention on what he can do, because he is in many ways a better athlete than Diego Pavia, and we know before Alabama's given up a lot of rushing yards to Raheem Sanders when he was at Arkansas. So I think that's got to be the focus for this Tide defense. How do we stop the run? How do we stop a mobile quarterback like Sellers?
All right, let's get to the important stuff, Roger. This is a conversation that is sweeping the college football world. All right. Why the hell would Kalen DeBoer wear a T-shirt on the sidelines? I mean, this is outrageous. I can't believe he would do that to this football program last weekend.
It's amazing what pops up, what people care about when you lose versus when you win, because I got to tell you guys, the focus after the Western Kentucky game, his first game, everybody was saying around this program, man, isn't it cool Coach DeBoer is wearing, this long sleeve T-shirt with a little hood and like black joggers. I mean, he looks totally chill and comfortable and ready to go for anything that happens. Well, I don't have confirmation on this. My only guess is that he probably once again had a pullover or a hoodie or something he was going to wear this past week, but it was pretty hot in Nashville. Like, it was 85 degrees at kickoff, and on the field turf, it felt more like 95 or 100. So it was I'll give him credit there. It was a very hot day. He went to the T-shirt. I have nothing other for you than, again, his style was praised week one. Now it's become a question after a week 5 loss. So again, that's college football. That's the duality of a fan base, I guess.
Look, man, hey, Lenore Sellers got popped and lost the ball against Kentucky, and all of a sudden he needed to take his glasses off. Okay, that was the thing around it. Well, you can't wear the glasses. You're gonna need contacts. It's. To me, he's smart. It's hot. I'm going to wear a shirt that keeps me cool on the sideline. I just found that incredibly funny this week when that came up, because it's like you said, it's college football. All right. If there's, something, though, I would say off the field, maybe in South Carolina's favor this weekend, it's the fact that they aren't going to kick this game off under the lights. They will play at 11 a.m. Central Time inside of Bryant-Denny Stadium. Compare the atmospheres. And look, I know Alabama, the football program, respects every opponent that they play. I get that. Let's also be honest here. South Carolina this is not going to generally probably draw the attention that an LSU would when they come to town, or Georgia or Tennessee, so on and so forth. I get it. But they are coming off a loss, and we know that they're laser focused, at least the team is. So what's the atmosphere like 11 a.m., 12 o'clock in the afternoon compared to being under the lights over there in the fall?
Typically, kind of like any place, I think Williams-Brice, I'm sure you guys would say, plays a little differently when you start earlier in the day versus at night. We know how great an atmosphere Willie B can be. It's pretty similar here, and I think we just saw Alabama football at its best at home a couple weeks ago against Georgia, and part of that is thanks to President Trump in a roundabout way, because of his being there. Everybody had to be in the stadium early with all the secret security measures that were in. The gates opened way earlier, and the whole stadium was full an hour before the game began. And that was the most electric pregame warmups I've ever seen at a sporting event. I mean, everybody was living and dying from the start. And, when you have they love to have these kind of hype videos that play, showing the tradition, great plays of Alabama football. They have a national championship video that plays with some of the great moments from the national championship years. To have that with a full crowd was really something. It won't be as packed from the start, just for the fact that security is a lot different for this ball game than it was a couple of weeks ago with the president in town. But now this fan base has to bring some energy, and I think Kalen DeBoer has challenged the fan base with it, and I think the players have as well, saying, hey, you guys supported us in a great way against Georgia. We need you even more right now, even though it's an earlier start, and even though it's against a Gamecocks team that's maybe maybe unranked versus number 2 Georgia. I mean, we've got to have that energy from the start, and there will be a lot of loud noises in the building. Our music staff has cranked it up to levels I had never heard before over the last few weeks, and I imagine that's going to be very similar coming up on Saturday. But I think this is a fan base that they're ticked off. They're really upset because Vanderbilt was just, again, you'd beaten them 23 straight times, hadn't lost to them since 1984. That's what has made this loss so shocking versus, if Alabama drops the Georgia game, or, in the last couple of years, they lost to Texas A&M kind of early in the 21 season, found a way to get their way back to the SEC championship game and won that against Georgia. I think just the fact that it's Vanderbilt has put everybody in a little bit of a shock, and then, really ticked off by this point of the week. And so I think you're going to see a pretty ravenous fan base ready to go for the Gamecocks coming up on Saturday.
All right. Other than, we'll let you run on this. I know you got to get you out of here in just a second. Other than one of my favorite diners in America, the City Cafe in Northport, Alabama. I'm not making the trip this weekend, but every time I'm down there, I'll eat it there. As much as they'll have me, I'm there. It is just a delightful place to eat breakfast and lunch. Other than that, we have many folks that watch and listen to our program who are making the trip west on I-20. Any quick suggestions, just things to see outside the ballpark, places to eat, whatever it may be?
Yeah, just make sure you take some time to walk around campus. Really, all the main campus attractions are pretty tight to Bryant-Denny Stadium. Only a few blocks away, you can see the quad, which will have all the tailgating tents set up around the historic Denny chimes that are kind of the focal point of campus. That's right across the street from the President's Mansion, which is an old antebellum style house, where there are a lot of pictures taken, and just you get that true Southern campus feel when you're in that area. And then looking around the Walk of Champions is really cool. There are statues of all the championship coaches, national champion coaches that are right there next to the Walk of Champions. So it's a really great setting. A couple quick places to go. I'd say mostly breakfast places, the one that's across the street, and they're going to have a long line. Ramajamas is the one that's been talked about, by every, they show on ESPN all the time because, again, it's literally across the street from the stadium. And they've been the popular place that have had the dishes with like 18 strips of bacon on burgers to celebrate the 18 national champions, things like that. So it's pretty good. Heritage House is another good coffee shop in town. Strange Brew Coffee is good. So I'm mostly going to give you breakfast recommendations right before you make your way to Bryant-Denny Stadium for the game. But again, it's a cool college town. Like you mentioned, City Cafe is great. There are a lot of different great spots around downtown, which is a quick walk as well, and the strip from Bryant-Denny Stadium. So hopefully your fans enjoy the trip.
They will. Oh, they will. They will. Is the Houndstooth still open?
I believe so. Yes. Okay. I'm getting too old to get in there now.
Yeah.
If I try to walk in there, like, wait a second, you're in your 30s, get away. But no, it's still going strong.
those days are long gone. Yeah. I almost got kicked out of there, but my girlfriend's brother worked at the door at the time. I was able to stay. I didn't do anything wrong. I just had a bad shirt on. So
yeah,
they didn't want me in there. Hey, Roger, I think everybody sees why we enjoy having you on. You are such a class act and just brilliant at what you do. Alabama's lucky to have you in the booth. We look forward to getting you back here pretty soon. Basketball's right around the corner, of course, and both of these programs are going to be pretty good here once again this season. So we'll get you back on to talk about that. But have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I hope it's a great game.
Yeah, JB, Phil, and JC, appreciate you guys having me on anytime. I look forward to chatting about Alabama and South Carolina, but have a great weekend. We'll see you guys. Thank you.
Yes, sir.